we follow the UFO headlines on a regular basis. And there's a lot of news going on that I'm really excited to talk about. Some of it Antonio and I talked when we were on Coast to Coast a couple of weeks ago. We're not even just a week from yesterday. But there's more news that has happened on the subjects we were talking about on Coast to Coast. And if Jason, our news correspondent, doesn't talk about those, I'll bring those up and we'll talk about those. But ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the one and the only Open Minds Radio's very own news correspondent, Jason McClellan. Jason, hello, how are you?
I'm great, Alejandro. How are you, my friend?
Not too bad.
Very good to be here, and greetings to you all out there, all to our wonderful listeners around this wonderful planet of ours. This is your Open Minds news brief for Monday, April 4th, 2011. It's April already. This year is going quickly. I like that, though. We'll start off with a story that was big from the weekend. Multiple UFOs appeared in the sky above South Chicago on Saturday night. A woman among the witnesses observed the line of mysterious lights in the sky, and she recorded the event with her cell phone camera. The sighting left witnesses scratching their heads, and it was reported on by various media outlets. But according to AOL News, Renee Hutchinson, founder and president of a foundation that fights for strict child abuse laws, claims the strange lights were simply Chinese lanterns, quote, released in the air in memory of abuse victims, end quote. While Chicago's ABC affiliate, WLS-TV, reported witness descriptions of the lights as orange-colored blinking lights, their appearance in the video is quite white. Tests conducted by Open Minds, that's Alejandro and let's see, who else did we have? We had Maureen and myself. Mm-hmm. Fun test we did.
Undisclosed and a person who wants to remain anonymous.
Correct. We did our own test with Chinese lanterns, and we found out, and we did these with multiple colored Chinese lanterns, and found out whether it's a white Chinese lantern or a green Chinese lantern, all you really see from the ground is an orange flickering light. Mm-hmm. That's what they look like in the sky. So it's interesting. I mean, the orange flickering color would be consistent with what WLS-TV, how they said the description from witnesses was, but the video doesn't seem to fit what the description they gave.
Oh, so you don't think possibly these were the balloons?
No,
Chinese lanterns.
I think a lot of videos we see are quite identifiably Chinese lanterns. Yeah. But the video, and it looked like a good video too. I mean, the lights in the sky appear differently depending on what kind of camera you have, what kind of device you're using to capture the video with. But this seemed to be very bright white lights. Whereas we took video of ours with multiple cameras, different types of cameras, different qualities, and in all of them, orange flickering lights.
That's true. Now, it could be a problem with the camera, though, something with the white balance or something like that.
It could certainly be that.
Because I didn't look at the video closely. Honestly, by the time I had looked at this story, they had already talked about the balloons and, how that had happened at the same time. So I already had the perspective, case closed. Honestly, when I looked at them, and the characteristics were similar, at least in the very little that I saw, to the lantern. So I just didn't watch much or pay much attention. So I'll have to take a closer look.
The video is interesting to watch. It most likely was some sort of balloon, some illuminated balloon or lantern, sky lantern. But the characteristics, with the color, struck me as odd.
Yeah. Right, in the video. And I know what you're saying because the lights did not look colored.
Right.
In fact, the video didn't look like it had color.
That could also be true. That could also be true and could explain it. Mm-hmm. But again, just because somebody comes forward and says, I was releasing lanterns at that time, there wasn't enough information in the story to seal the deal for me, because we've seen that in the past, especially a lot of the sightings in Florida, where someone will come forward and say, we were releasing balloons at a party, but that party was many miles away and didn't necessarily happen at the same time or time that the lanterns would have been in the sky. As we saw, those things don't stay in the air that long.
And from our experience, I mean, I live on the far east side of the little town of Maricopa. If I had seen a UFO to the east, and then someone said they had launched balloons at the same time on the west side of town. There's no way those balloons on the west side of town would have been what I saw.
Not a chance.
So, I mean, because even in a small town like what I have, from our experience, the balloons don't float that far.
Correct.
People throughout my neighborhood probably saw maybe in a few surrounding neighborhoods, but that's about it.
Right.
They don't go that high or that far.
And like we pointed out before, there are various types of balloons, various types of lanterns. So it's certainly possible. But from our experience, from what we've seen personally, not the case.
Yep.
So it was an interesting video. You should watch it again.
Yeah.
So.
I will.
The Daily Mail recently quoted NASA Inspector General Paul Martin as stating that NASA is, quote, vulnerable to computer incidents that could have a severe and catastrophic effect on agency assets, operation, and personnel, end quote. Martin went on to specifically identify the vulnerable targets. 6 computer servers associated with IT assets that control spacecraft and contain critical data. It has vulnerabilities that would allow remote attackers to take control of or render them unavailable. It's kind of weird that this guy would do his analysis but then release a public statement saying, here's where our problems are.
Yeah.
Open door, come get us.
Yeah.
Kind of scary. But these IT security issues aren't anything new for NASA, as multiple hackers have successfully penetrated the agency's network in the past. Briton Gary McKinnon successfully hacked into several NASA and U.S. military computers during 2001 and 2002 in search of information relating to UFOs. McKinnon's work has been called the biggest military computer hack of all time, and he is currently fighting extradition to the U.S. The network penetrations by McKinnon and other hackers seem to have not been important enough to NASA to merit improved network security.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if you were brave and or dumb enough, I don't know which would be most appropriate, to try to hack into NASA's computer network, it wouldn't be that difficult if you were persistent like McKinnon was. He wasn't doing anything that sophisticated, and he was able to get in.
Right.
And it's probably the case today, which is unfortunate and a little concerning, but and which is probably true of some military computers. But unfortunately, you know, even though it might be very simple to do, I certainly would not advise anybody to do it.
Oh, no.
Because you can be like Gary and be facing the rest of your life in prison.
Poor guy's been fighting for 10 years now, pretty much. But it is odd, because I know we've discussed this as having been brought up in the media relating to the McKinnon case, about how Gary's hacks brought to light all of these flaws with their security, NASA specifically. So they supposedly were taking measures to improve their security 10 years ago, but apparently those measures weren't enough.
Yeah.
Or they just didn't bother.
Yeah, it's surprising. I talked to our IT guy here, and he talked about how back when Gary McKinnon was doing his hacking, security was not as big of an issue, and it was much more lax. And especially for the government, I know it's very difficult. For instance, my parents worked for the National Park Service. They had to have so many logins and everything to get into their computers. Everything was monitored. They couldn't look at certain websites and things like that. And it's extremely restrictive, more so than in the public sector, you know, where I was working, which we still had security. But so I was surprised, you know, it would be so easy. But I think what happens when you're so constrictive, then you'll have a group of employees who are going to look for ways to get around that. And so they probably have some computers that are totally unrestricted because they don't want to go through the hassle of everyday stuff, and then it makes it easier and blah, blah. And then here and there. And then you have people you contract with who aren't adhering to the standards of security, and here you have it, people.
Well, they need to get their act together.
Yeah, they better.
It's almost like they don't care, though. I don't know.
Before people start accessing their satellites and dropping them on helpless civilians.
Danger.
Yeah.
I don't want a satellite falling on my head. Here's an update from a story we talked about last week about mysterious lights that were in the sky above Lafayette, Colorado. These lights were captured on video by one witness. The UFO video gained widespread attention and continues to receive attention from some media outlets around the world. Some, however, believe the strange lights were nothing more than road flares attached to balloons. Life Science's Bad Science columnist Benjamin Radford published an article last week presenting the road flare theory to explain the Colorado lights. In his article, Radford bases his theory on comments made by Leroy Vandervet, the witness who videotaped the lights. Vandervet said the lights moved silently through the sky. From this, Radford concluded that, quote, the lights were likely floating, not moving under their own power, end quote. This led him to his suggestion of road flares tied to balloons. Supporting his theory further, Radford mentions the descriptions provided by Vandervet of the disappearance of the lights. After staying steady, they faded away. Radford points out that this fading away is exactly like dying road flares, how they would behave if they were tied to balloons. But, as Radford points out, of course it's also possible that aliens visited Colorado last week in a spacecraft that just happened to look like road flares tied to balloons. The disappearance of lights by gradual fading away doesn't prove that flares were tied to balloons in this case, even though hoaxes involving balloons and road flares have been proven in the past. While further evidence to support this theory may surface in the future, for now the lights still remain unidentified.
Yeah, that article in particular was frustrating. I watch his articles in his Bad Science, and this one was going a little far, I felt, just in that he was making these proclamations with very little evidence, which is exactly what he blames people such as UFO researchers of doing.
You're right.
And then he does the same thing. He even referenced a case in New Jersey where this had happened, but he forgot to mention that in that case in New Jersey, those kids faced community service for tying the flares to the balloons and floating them up there. So how do we definitely, it's a rare occurrence that people are tying balloons to flares and floating them around, especially after these kids got in a lot of trouble for doing it in New Jersey. It's possible somebody could do that, and his argument is that that's more possible than them being extraterrestrial. And sure, that's a decent point to make. But he really jumped to that conclusion, and not only that, then a bunch of other news sources went out and said they were flares.
Right.
And declare this as if it was fact, when we don't know that at all.
And this guy typically does a much better job. This one, he seemed very flippant and sarcastic,
Right.
and it was not typical, but
Yeah.
it's unfortunate to read that. But
He even said something like just suggesting that they're extraterrestrial is something like a really silly idea or something like that was his quote.
Yeah. Well, we have another update to a story we've been talking about, and that is some feel that the Jerusalem UFO video case has been closed. Earlier this year, multiple videos showing a UFO hovering over Jerusalem's Dome of the Rock received widespread attention from the public and from the media. Benjamin Radford, again, who we just spoke about, came to his own conclusion that the videos were almost certainly a hoax based on his experience investigating UFO images. But his decision to deem the case closed came after investigations was released by MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. MUFON released a statement last week with their findings regarding the Jerusalem UFO case video, and their chief photo and video analysis, Mark D'Antonio, stated, "I firmly believe that the UFO was not real for many reasons. This video and other Jerusalem UFO videos are, in my opinion, hoaxes. This case has been highly controversial since the first video emerged in January and is likely to remain so."
Yes, definitely amongst here as well. It's a tough one. I mean, I have some doubts, honestly, about it because the patterns, and it's not like regular sightings where they're posted and you hear from the witnesses and the witnesses are talking about their videos, and this one just seemed very staged. And you have like the last video that came out, when the person released it, they created a new YouTube for it, and then they have this bombastic kind of introduction and ending to it that lasts longer than their video.
Right.
I mean, who sees a genuine UFO is going to go edit it all together with this text and then with this music and create a whole production around their sighting? That doesn't seem to make sense to me.
No, there have been many red flags with this whole case, but
yeah. So some people say, well, they mix in fakes with reals. I don't know.
In other news, the New Zealand Defence Force, also known as NZDF, released the last 3 volumes of their nearly 60 years worth of UFO files last week. However, the NZDF prefers the term UAS, unidentified aerial sightings, but the NZDF will no longer accept UFO reports or keep files on them. According to TV3 in New Zealand, the NZDF released a statement last week stating, quote, "The NZDF does not have any role or expertise in the respect of UAS, nor does it devote any resources to record or investigate them, and it has no evidence to substantiate the existence of these alleged phenomena," end quote. The NZDF is advising UFO witnesses to contact police with their sighting reports. The newly released files join the more than 2,000 pages of UFO files that were released back in December.
Yeah, it's interesting. They kind of did like Britain. They release some files and then say, we're not investigating any of this stuff. That we don't think there's anything to it. Even though some of their cases, too, are pretty interesting.
They've got some great cases in there. And as we pointed out when they initially released the files in December, it's fascinating to read through some of their correspondence to see how courteous they were to absolutely everybody who sent them information, sent them questions. They would write back these very pleasant letters or pleasant emails saying, "Thank you so much for your information." They were very nice about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Very professional.
They've been very courteous. It's unfortunate they didn't take them a little more serious, although maybe they do behind the scenes. We'll ask our guests about this later on.
Absolutely. And it seemed kind of strange that they came out with a statement saying, "We're done. We don't have any information. We don't know anything."
Yeah.
Just sort of
leave us alone.
Leave us alone. Yeah.
Which doesn't seem like, just like when we talked about the British, it doesn't seem responsible that they would not want to hear about strange things flying around in their skies.
Right.
Because that discourages someone who might see, a foreign, an object that's made from foreign technology coming to check them out.
Alejandro, I've got some entertainment news for you.
Great.
Singer Katy Perry believes in extraterrestrial life. The pop singer just debuted the video for her song E.T., the most recent #1 single off her latest record. When discussing the video with MTV News, Perry stated, quote, "It's very difficult for me to look up in the sky in the middle of the night and not think that our planet is one of," and here's where she quotes you, I think, Alejandro, "one of a bajillion." She used bajillion, and that made me think of you. Her interest in outer space is so great that she and her husband, Russell Brand, have purchased tickets for a Virgin Galactic spaceflight.
Yep.
So they're on their way to space.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
But what she fails to realize is that it's actually a trillion bajillion. So she's almost there. Which would just blow her mind that it's actually a trillion. But some people say a trillion, zillion, gajillion, bajillion. That's a lot, man.
I'll need you to write that down for me next time because I lose
Takes
track
a
of my
long
zeros here.
Takes a long time to write out all those zeros.
But Alejandro, she did say that she is extremely fascinated in the subject and is drawn to anything related to it. So you need to give her our magazine.
Oh, I should. And then she's going to be flying up there with Burt Rutan, I guess.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So, Miss Katy Perry, if you're listening, openminds.tv. We've got a great magazine. Check it out. We'll even send you a free copy.
You'll love it.
So. Also in entertainment news, Sigourney Weaver believes in extraterrestrials. The actress, who is famous for her role as Ellen Ripley in the Alien movie franchise, recently told a German magazine, quote, "We are not alone in the universe. I think there's a department in our government which is exclusively dedicated to quashing reports about aliens, and that's so unfair. It would be nice if we weren't just able to read about it in the tabloids."
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that results from all of these movies, which is great because then the actors or actresses, in this case she was in Paul, so they asked her, well, do you believe in aliens? And obviously she had this response. Earlier, Battle of L.A., the lead guy was asked on Jay Leno, you seen a UFO? He says yes. The next guest comes out, Christy Brinkley. She says, I saw a UFO too. And then we have the Sammy Hagar thing. We got Katy Perry.
Yep, we're going to see a lot of it, Alejandro. I mean, we pointed out before the explosion of these Hollywood movies about the topic we have. Now we've got huge pop stars singing about it, and you're exactly right. They go on these TV shows, do their press circuits, and the topic comes out, the
Mhm.
questions, and you get more and more people because right now it's popular and you've got everybody else doing it. So they're not afraid to go on a show and say, oh, yeah, I believe in aliens.
It's great they feel more comfortable doing it
Right.
because then the public, of course, is going to feel more comfortable,
That's absolutely right.
which is great.
Yep.
Because then people who didn't even believe it's like in high school when the star said something and you're like, "Nuh-uh, you were saying you didn't believe that last week, and now you
Mhm.
change your mind just because Katy Perry." Well, I think she's probably right. I didn't think about it.
No, you're right. It does open people up a lot.
Yep. So
I'm
it's
excited,
exciting.
man. Yeah. Well, Alejandro, that is it for the news for today, my friend. Be sure to check out these stories and more at openminds.tv, your source for UFO-related news. I am your Open Minds correspondent, Jason McClellan, and you've been briefed.